Good morning out there. My name is Erin Kane and I'm a part of Schneider. I'm in driver recruiting and I'm here with Andrea, and we are going to talk with you today about electronic logging and how that's going to affect you personally and the industry coming up here very shortly. Andrea, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. So as Erin said, I'm Andrea Sequin. I lead regulatory services for the Schneider enterprise. I've been in my role for the last 6 years, which has allowed me to see quite a bit of change in the regulatory space. The most recent of which is, of course, the one that took effect in December of 2017 with the ELD mandate for the industry going into effect on December 18th. And that's where we are today.
So I've invited Andrea to come talk with the driver and the fleet out there, anyone interested in driving, anyone that's with a company today and maybe isn't quite sure about how electronic logging is going to affect them and what they're being told within their organization. This is something we have taken very seriously for the last 7 or 8 years and are fully prepared for all of the changes that will come without the driver being affected. So we really want to take the opportunity to share our knowledge with what we've learned in the last 7 or 8 years, share it with you, and obviously you can also submit questions online and we can try to get to those and answer them as well. Again, my name is Erin and I'm here with Andrea, and we're here to talk through the electronic logging changes and how that's going to just form the industry in a different way. So Andrea, can you tell us a little bit about the dates and the timing and what all of those things mean? We had something that went into effect December 18th officially, and there's another date of April 1st. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's creating a lot of confusion. So the ELD mandate took effect December 18th of 2017. So the rule is in effect today. As we sit here today, everyone who is participating in interstate commerce should be using an electronic logging device if they're required to complete logs. So there are some small segments of the industry who maybe stay very close to home, who are not required to do logs. They also are then not required to do an electronic log. There's also folks who drive older model equipment before 2000. Those folks are exempt from the rule as well. Their equipment may not be capable of actually doing all the things it needs to do electronic logs. But everyone else should be doing electronic logs today. So a lot of people are talking about the April 1st date. So April 1st, 2018 is when really the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, which is the group of enforcement officers who inspect commercial motor vehicles, they've said between December and April, they will do what they call soft enforcement, which means if they encounter a truck who should have an electronic log but does not, they will still issue a violation, but they will not put that driver out of service for 10 hours. The violation that's issued also will not impact that driver or that carrier's CSA scores, or the Compliance Safety Accountability Score, which is a scorecard for both the motor carrier and also a history on each individual driver of what's happened with them at a roadside inspection. So from December to April, if you are stopped and you do not have an electronic log, and you should, you may still get a violation. You should not experience an out of service for that reason. If there's another reason you might need to be out of service, you could still be put out of service. You could be issued a citation, which is a monetary fine. That's up to the discretion of the officer. Come April 1st, if you are stopped and you don't have those electronic logs, you will get the violation. You will be placed out of service for 10 hours, and you will also have that violation impact your CSA score. So the rule's in effect now. You get the penalties increase on April 1st. The impact to the actual driver really changes with that out of service event. No one wants to be parked roadside for 10 hours. No. So you really need to make sure that if you don't have a device today, you get one. And then I would also recommend that if you have one that's been given to you by your carrier, that you make sure it's a certified device.
So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you know, or what are some of the things you can do if you want to be an accountable driver and you're not sure? How do you know what a compliant device is, or what it would look like, or what some of the key pieces to look for?
Sure. So there are a few things that a driver can do. The easiest is if you know the make and model of your device, The FMCSA actually has a website that lists all of the allowable electronic logging devices. So manufacturers have to register their product with the government, and they have to self-certify that that device does all the things it's supposed to do. We can talk about what some of those are. But the first thing you can do is if you just Google FMCSA ELD, you will land on their website. There's a link for the list of certified devices, and you can just find your device. And if you don't see it there, I would ask your motor carrier about that. You should see it there. That tells you that it's been certified. And that's frankly what the roadside officer is going to do, is look at your device and check that list.
Okay, wonderful. My name is Erin, and I'm here with Andrea, who's a member of our regulatory team, and she's here to talk to us today about electronic logging and what's happening in the industry. There's a lot of confusion about dates and things, and we're going through a soft launch, and as of April 1st, things are going to become very different, and we want to make sure that drivers out there know what to look for, how they're going to be impacted, and obviously to talk about how Schneider's prepared for April 1st and how drivers won't be affected negatively in any way. So great. So are there any other things that they should look for in regards to knowing if their device is compliant?
Yeah, so in addition to checking to make sure that it's on the list, that's step one. The other things that I would tell you to look for is a few of the key requirements for an electronic logging device is you must, that device must talk to the engine. So it should not just be an app on your phone. There should be something that is actually plugged in and they say integrated to the engine to detect that that truck is moving. It also must record your location information at each duty status change. It also, another good one to look for is if anything goes wrong, if there is a sensor failure, they call it, the device is to both audibly and visually tell the driver that there's something wrong. And that's a really good one to check for. Okay. You should also be asked to certify your logs daily. That is another requirement. And you should, if your motor carrier edits your log, that edit should be presented to you and you should be given an opportunity to either accept or reject that edit. Okay, so those are some of the key things to look for to make sure that the device you are using is in fact a certified ELD.
So what about an app? I've seen and heard discussions about apps that are able to assist with that as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the big thing to watch out for with apps is there are apps that do electronic logs, which is simply moving from paper to electronic, and you, the user, are saying, I was driving, I was not driving. The difference with an ELD app is, again, that part that's talking to the engine, there's that piece that's integrated. The driver does not get to say, I was driving. The device that's plugged into the truck tells the app you were driving.
Got it.
That's the difference.
Wonderful, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin, and I'm here with Andrea from our regulatory department, and we're here to talk a little bit about electronic logging and the changes in regulation that are happening today and what April 1st means and going beyond. So thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit more about how Schneider has been prepared and what you've learned over the last 6 years being part of this change?
Yeah, so Schneider's been doing electronic logging since 2009. So we have almost a decade of experience with doing electronic logging. Our dispatch systems have been integrated to take that information and make our dispatch more efficient, which means more miles for the driver. And we've really built a great support system around electronic logs. So for example, we have 24/7 support for our logging application. So at any point in time, if a driver's device breaks, or if they have a question, or they need assistance with editing, we have someone here who is an expert available year-round, 24 hours a day, for them to call into and get assistance. Whether that's an immediate need because they're roadside with an officer and they need help, or they just need assistance with relearning something or being reminded on how how to do an edit, we have folks available to do that.
You know, that brings up another question. So what if while you're driving and you're compliant with your hours of service, your device breaks? What happens then, or what's considered compliant in that scenario?
So if a device breaks, a driver is required to move back to paper logs. So they need to recreate their prior 7 days and the current day on paper so that they have it available for an officer. And then they need to notify their carrier within 1 day that their device has broken. And then their carrier needs to repair that device within 8 days. So there is a requirement to get those broken devices fixed.
Okay, perfect. And so does that mean Qualcomm is going to go away? And if so, what unit will be replacing it?
Yeah, so for Schneider, we actually are running an MCP 200 device. That is currently what they call an AOBRD, or an automatic onboard recording device. It is a grandfathered device under the rule, so it's almost an ELD. There's a few things that need to change around user ID and password needs to be more secure, and a few other changes. We will do an over-the-air upgrade to move from AOBRD to ELD without having to touch the trucks. So we are currently in the planning stages for when that will occur. It will likely be in the next few months. But the fleet will get communication about when that's happening. They will also receive some training about what those changes are that they will see, and we look forward to having that happen. And again, the support that exists for that product remains the same.
Wonderful. Again, my name is Erin. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with Andrea from our regulatory department, and we're here to talk about electronic logging and how the industry is changing here in 2018, because there's a lot of big changes. So can you tell me a little bit about how the driver's performance is under electronic logging, since we have implemented this and been refining it for 6 years?
Yeah, so what we have seen is under electronic logging, we really do not see hours of service violations all that often. It really is infrequent that we have a driver stopped and found with an out of service or with an hours of service violation. You can actually, as a driver, you can see this. You can see this about any motor carrier. This is public information. If you look at Schneider National Carrier's out of service rates, which is how often when we are stopped for a roadside inspection does the driver end up being placed out of service because of something related to them, whether it's their license or their logs. We have that occur less than 1% of the time. It actually is 0.6%. The national average is 5.5%. So we well exceed the national average, and we just frankly do not put the fleet in a position where they wind up out of service. And that includes our support around towing if we have to, having you reach out to customer service if you are approaching your hours limit, and us working together to get you to a safe place before that happens. And like I said, we've just really through the last decade have refined how to work with electronic logs and how to adapt our system to make sure that we're putting the driver in a safe position where they're not risking themselves or frankly their driving record by being found out of hours in a roadside inspection.
That's really good feedback, because we hear from drivers that we interview in driver recruiting that, well, there's somebody, big brother's looking at me. I'm now going to be watched every moment of every day, and it's not really a Schneider thing. It's a regulated expectation of the industry from a safety perspective. But to your point, we've worked really hard to not have the driver have a skip and beat in making money and being safe, and having all the tools available to them in the event that they get close or something's wrong with their device or whatever the case may be.
And they help us make sure that we are able to proactively identify those situations and reach out to the driver and ask how we can be of assistance.
I would also like to just piggyback off of something Andrea said. There is 24-hour, 7-day, 365 coverage on logging support, but we also have a training program that we will teach you how to use the ELDs. You're going to be out with a training engineer when you're with Schneider that'll be able to get through all of that technology change, so you know exactly how to perform and use that that system in the truck effectively. And obviously once you're on the road by yourself, there is that logging support. So definitely a lot of time and energy and effort has gone into making sure we set you up for success in that space. So how about a little bit more about the Cdl monitoring? So let's say you do have a violation, or let's say, you know, what other things does Schneider do to help the driver be successful and know when something might be going bump in the night?
Yeah, so we have a host of things that we do from a regulatory and compliance space that we have put in place. They're not mandated, they're not required by law, but we've found they provide value for the driver. So we spend some extra money to put those things in place. And a great example of that is Cdl monitoring. So we have the ability to pay a fee and monitor the Cdl of the drivers who operate under our authority. And what that allows us to do is know what's going on with that driver's license and alert them if there's anything that they may not be aware of. So for example, we oftentimes will get advance notification of a suspension or a downgrade that's going to occur, and that could be for a host of reasons, things from fines or failure to appear for a parking ticket. It could be as simple as that. And we're able to reach out to the driver and make sure they're aware that this action is about to happen so that they can proactively go make sure that that doesn't occur. And we've just seen really great success with advance notice to the fleet on anything related to their license. So that service is really helpful for us. Another thing that we've implemented to ensure that we have a good roadside inspection experience is we do offer and pay for scale bypass, which is a product currently today the majority of the fleet runs DriveWise. So what that actually does is for every DriveWise, actually for every scale in the country, the MCP 200 will alert the driver 2 miles out that they're approaching a scale. And then when they get within 1 mile, it will tell them whether or not they need to pull in or whether or not they've been given the approval to bypass. And the way that technology works is we tell them it's a Schneider National Carrier truck coming. They decide whether or not they need to pull us in. Frankly, we have a very good bypass rate, and the vast majority of the time the fleet's able to just continue on their way.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I understand that from a compliance perspective in the area of sleep apnea, we also have a great program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is again not something that we're federally required to do, but we've just seen really great value from this program. So we, back in 2006, identified the need for more effort in the area of sleep apnea, and that sleep apnea was a condition that affected a number of commercial motor vehicle drivers. So we began a small pilot, and that program has grown over the last 10 years. And essentially now what we do is I look for drivers who may be at risk for sleep apnea. We provide them an opportunity to be tested and determine whether or not they do in fact have that condition. And then if they are enrolled in our benefits plan, they actually get all of those supplies and their resupplies covered at 100%. It's treated like preventative care because truly we have found that it is preventative, and that if you are a driver with sleep apnea, that effective treatment of that disease improves other conditions like cardiac or diabetes, and some of the others that we see often go together with sleep apnea. So our fleet who participates in that program just has a really great experience. We've got a number of coaches who work with new drivers who may be struggling to acclimate to the treatment, that work with them to help them see that at the end they really do get an improved life by treating that condition.
Health of drivers is so important. The work they do is important, and not every position has a lot of hand unloading. Some do, some don't. So just protecting the driver the best you can is really important. We do have a question from Brad. He wants to know about the tablets that are within the fleet. And do we do tableting, and how is that integration going, and is that something we're going to move forward with in the future?
Sure, so great question. We talked about the MCP 200, the OmniTrax device. We do have a segment of the fleet on our West Coast who is running what we call the tablet. It has a separate hours of service product. That hours of service product as well is currently in AOBRD, and again, we are working with that provider to do an over-the-air update to full ELD software. So those tablets will remain. We will upgrade that hours of service product as well, and ultimately across the fleet run ELD software.
Perfect. My name is Erin, and I'm here with Andrew. If you're just joining us, good morning. We're here to talk a little bit about electronic logging and what that means going forward here in 2018, and also all of the great benefits that Schneider has, and how we're ready for electronic logging, and how this is really the year of the driver. So thank you for joining us. We've talked a little bit about significant dates. So as of December 18th, the effect went in, I guess, officially.
The rule took effect,
right?
Yes.
And April 1st is when, I guess, that you kind of have a grace period between December 18th and April 1st. There'll be kind of a soft launch. You'll maybe receive citations, but as of April 1st, you will be put out of hours for 10 hours.
Yep.
It will affect your CSA score both individually and for the company. And there's a lot of movement at this point in time trying to get there. I think you did say something before we started that there's a backlog of ELDs that need to be implemented just in the industry. There's been a spike of needing to get those, so it's definitely on everyone's mind.
Yeah, so we've seen, and folks have probably seen the articles, that there are carriers out there who are stating that they've ordered ELDs, but they are waiting for them to come in and deliver. So some folks really are using this current time between December and April to get equipped. But again, the reality is the rule is in effect now, and you can be issued the violation or a citation. You just will not experience the 10-hour out of service until April 1st. And you may have a device, we talked about this at the top of the segment, you may have a device that you've been told is an electronic logging device. You, as a driver, can validate that by going to the FMCSA website and looking at the list of certified devices to make sure that your device is on that list, and then also making sure some of the key elements that are required are occurring on your device, such as something is integrated to the engine, that it's not you telling the device when you're driving, that the truck is telling the device when you're driving, that you're required to approve your logs daily, that you have an opportunity to review any edit made by the motor carrier before it affects your log. And those are some of the things that you can look for. Another great one is that if there's a sensor failure, if something on the device is not working, you should have a visual alert that comes on and an audible alert to tell you that that has happened, so that you know to go back to a paper log.
Perfect. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that Schneider has been compliant and been using AOBRDs since 2010, so we've been growing into this process for a long time now. We want to make sure that everyone out there is informed on what to look for, know that we've been compliant for many, many years and been working through this knowing that it's not something that's going to go away, which is a question I have for you. I just go out there and read a lot of articles about this mandate, and people keep talking about it's going to get delayed, we need more exceptions, we need more time. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's true, there has been a number of exemptions requested. There's actually been a few exemptions that have been granted. So for example, if you're driving a rental truck that you're renting for less than 30 days, the government has granted an exemption for that. There are some small segments of the industry that have been granted exemptions as well. And there's a number of exemptions that are still out for review. So there's a very large one that's currently in comment period. But right now, those have not been approved. There's no indication one way or the other whether it will be approved or not. So what I can tell you is the rule took effect in December. Congress mandated it years before that. That's where it came from. And right now we are in soft enforcement, but we are set to turn into full enforcement on April 1st. So all I can tell you is it's a rule, and ensuring that you're in a position where you're compliant is the best thing for you.
Wonderful. And if you're a driver out there, either a new driver entering the industry or you're a driver that's been driving for a while and you're not really sure about where your company stands, we've given you a couple ideas on where to go to find out if they're compliant and some tips and tricks. But feel free to always call us, 1-800-44-PRIDE. Go to SchneiderJobs.com. There's a lot of things on the Slice of Orange blogs. There's a lot of information out there from a Schneider perspective that can give you additional information, or you can just give us a call and we'll talk through it with you, and we can probably find a spot for you as well. We have plenty of positions available. We're ready. We have a less than 1% out of service for a driver. We've been working through the kinks along the way since 2010. We're productive, we're compliant, and our hours of service rules all apply. So there are going to be folks out there that are going to try to run without being compliant, and we don't want you to be in that position. So definitely give us a call. So we've talked about a lot in the last almost half an hour. We've talked about the electronic logging and the dates and what all those things mean, how to identify if you are on a compliant device, what some of the exceptions might be. We've talked about our hours of service being, for the driver being less than 1% at 0.6% against the industry average of 5.5%. From a vehicle perspective, I don't know if we talked about that.
Yeah, so when you think about what could get you stuck roadside for an out-of-service event, our vehicle out-of-service is also half of what the industry average is. So again, these are things you can check on any carrier before you go to work for them. Some of the smaller ones might not have a lot of data, so you want to be careful to watch for that. 0% if you've never been inspected is maybe not 0%. Versus we've done a number of inspections and these numbers hold up, and that's what we see across the fleet. So, and we continue to put efforts in place to continue to move those numbers down even further. And like Erin said, if you work for Schneider, we are confident that we are running folks who are compliant and qualified, and making sure that we're not putting you in a position where you're found roadside to be non-compliant.
And we've also got that logging support 24/7, so there is a way to talk to folks. We also have driver advisors out there, so even after you go through orientation and you're taught how to use the devices and you get out there on the road by yourself, there's also driver advisors that you can call in the off hours to get some more additional information, either about your load or your customer or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of driver support built around when you start with us. That's also another thing that we've been working on in the last year or two, so that a driver always feels like there's somewhere to go if they have a question. So we also have a Hazmat Hotline that you can call. There's a lot of rules regarding placarding and what's considered hazmat, and the customer doesn't always know, shipper doesn't always know. That Hazmat line is available for drivers to call in and make sure that they're compliant before they take off. So
yes, so that's one of the nice things about our size. It does allow us to provide 24/7 coverage for a lot of those areas that drivers may need support in, not during the typical first shift business day. So we've got folks available, and we're there to help to make sure that before you leave out, you're confident that you're compliant.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So if you have any other questions, we do have another one. There was just that talking about how the TEs are available to help too. Brad had mentioned that. Thank you, I appreciate that. Your training engineer is going to help you once you start with Schneider and you get through the formal process of learning in the classroom. You'll then go out with a training engineer, pull some loads, get some time under your belt. The training engineer will be able to help you as well.
And oftentimes those training engineers will make themselves available to you even after you've finished with them, and encourage you to call them, and if you have questions after you're out on your own, they're a great resource.
And of course your driver business leader is always available for you as well, and someone in that team. So a question from James: do you need to be over the road or can you be local? So we have over the road positions, we have what we call regional positions. We do have some local, they do get snatched up pretty quickly, but just check SchneiderJobs.com and you'll be able to see, put in your zip code and you'll be able to see what's available in your area. And you can always call 800-44-PRIDE and talk to someone about what's available in your area and make sure that we can fit you and match you to the right position for what you need. So I think we're just about out of time. I do have one more question from, I think, Eli. Are you required to have a LinkedIn account to apply at Schneider? No, you do set up a username and password when you apply, and that sends us your application so we can get you set up with an interview. But it's a pretty streamlined process. It'll ask you a couple of questions. You can also go on our webpage, and there's a quick link where you can just put in your name and email address and phone number, and someone will call you or email you as well. So there's a lot of different ways to get a hold of us. But the phone number again is 844-PRIDE. We're at schneiderjobs.com. There's a lot of information out there on electronic logging and what we have been doing to prepare for the last 6 or 10 years, and also what you need to know. So Andrea, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
So informative even for me. I really appreciate that. So we hope to talk to you soon. Again, I appreciate your time. My name is Erin, and I'm here with Andrea from Regulatory. Stay safe out there.